Aqui do meu lado esquerdo, mais extremo, a gente tem o David Heems, que é consultor do escritório de advocacia Ruthoff na Holanda. Ele é especialista em contencioso comercial, financeiro e de insolvências. E o David assessora empresas de investimento locais, holandesas e internacionais, com foco em situações de estresse financeiro. O David trabalha frequentemente em reestruturações transnacionais e, notadamente, esteve intensamente envolvido nas recuperações judiciais no Brasil da OSX e da OE. David usualmente realiza palestras sobre temas de insolvência e tem dado aulas de direito de recuperações e falências na Universidade de Amsterdã há aproximadamente 10 anos. Finalmente, o David é vice-presidente do Comitê de Reorganizações e Renegociações do International Bar Association, do IBA.
I already touched a bit upon the connection between Brazil and the Netherlands and the tax treaty we have, which is resulting in a great number of large corporations having their financing vehicles, and also, like in the OSX case, literally all their assets located in the Netherlands, or in any case structured via the Netherlands. And before I will touch upon some examples we see in the OE case, and literally Brazil and the Netherlands colliding on how things work or don't work, I will first tell a bit about the Dutch insolvencies. Some important things you need to know is that we don't have group insolvencies. Every entity needs to be bankrupted or in suspension of payments on a separate basis. And furthermore, there are no solvency ratios with any importance. So it's only a liquidity test. It doesn't matter what your solvency ratio is, as long as you can pay your due debts, you're not in a risk of bankruptcy. Here are some fun facts about Brazil and the Netherlands. I found some reports that said the Netherlands is the largest investor in Brazil. I'm not sure whether that's true, but it seems good to mention here. So in any case, that you see why such a small country has some relevance for Brazil. And before I come to how we deal with insolvencies such as RJ proceedings, let me first say how we deal with insolvencies within Europe. We have the insolvency regulation, which covers actually all the members of the European Union, and the effects of insolvencies within Europe. It's actually quite straightforward. If you get a bankruptcy in one of the EU countries, it had immediate effect over all assets within the EU. And there's only one sort of portal you need to go through, that is in which country you need to open insolvency proceedings. We determine that on the basis of the COMI, so the Center of Main Interest. And basically, if you have a statutory seat in a certain country, you have extremely strong presumption that the bankruptcy can be opened there. Furthermore, there's a factual test, but in the Netherlands, to be honest, it's almost nothing. Every financing vehicle we determine is located in the Netherlands because it pays taxes in the Netherlands, has a Dutch accountant, and holds shareholder meetings in the Netherlands. So that's it. So it has no activity whatsoever. Often it's only a mail address with no further activities. But for the Dutch courts, that's sufficient to say, well, it's located in the Netherlands, we can open the insolvency proceedings and put some insolvency lawyers to work. Then how we deal with non-EU insolvencies. We've got quite a strange approach because we accept foreign trustees, we accept the standing, a position, and in principle the powers of foreign bankruptcy trustees. But we do not accept the bankruptcy insofar as it affects assets located in the Netherlands. So let me give a concrete example. If I've attached assets located in the Netherlands, just stock or horses or cars, whatever, and a Brazilian bankruptcy is issued, the Brazilian trustee can come here and say, I represent the owner, the estate, I can sell the assets, but he has to compete with the attachment that's already on there. So, for instance, freezing orders or any other so to say, universal bankruptcy effects, we do not accept. So if it's an unpledged and unsecured assets, a trustee can come to the Netherlands and sell it and do whatever they want. But any other creditor can attach them, and you will have to start regular proceedings with the trustee in order to see whether the trustee can enforce the assets for the benefit of the estate. On the other hand, we like to believe in the Netherlands that our bankruptcies, Dutch bankruptcies, have universal effect all over the world. They include everything. So it's kind of a childish approach, actually, which I refer to as the toddler approach. I can play with all of your toys, but you cannot play with any of mine. And it also in the OI case, we'll see, has become a bit of a strange thing, because there once was a decision by a Brazilian court in which they ordered that the Dutch trustees could not basically touch the assets of the Dutch estate. And actually they got a penalty of 300,000 reais for every time they would do such a thing. So in the Netherlands, we spoke, oh, this is a shame, this cannot happen, while on the other hand, we do basically the same by not accepting foreign trustees in the Netherlands. But that's not what we said at the time. We presented some creditors and we said, it's a big shame, this cannot happen, how can a country do something like that? In the past few years, we've seen quite some interesting Brazilian-Dutch cases. We saw OSX, the oil drilling company, Agrenco, and obviously OI, very recent. And I have here the OI structure, which is extremely familiar for a lot of people. I think perhaps for everybody, but for the people who haven't studied this chart in detail for a million times, the essential thing is that we've got two Dutch financing vehicles. One was actually a sort of residual from a takeover of Portugal Telecom, and the original OI financing vehicles. So Portugal Telecom issued notes via its Netherlands subsidiary of 3.8 billion euros. OI Co-op or Finco issued for 1.9 million. And the whole issue is what happened with that money. Because even before the case started in Brazil, creditors in the Netherlands went to the court to try and stop Finco from on-lending funds to OI. They saw from the balance sheet of Finco, at least that's what they or we thought, there should have been a lot of assets, and we knew that OI was financial difficulties, and it was highly likely that it would attract more funds from Finco to even finance the RJ proceedings. We went to the court, and the court refused. Both at the district court and the appellate court, they refused the injunction to order Finco to not on-lend funds. And the courts basically said, well, one, your Finco notes are not due yet, so what are you talking about? You know, there's no obligation to repay. And also, it's a financing vehicle. Its whole purpose is on lending funds. And the appellate court made a sort of an additional comment, and it basically said, well, you've got only such a small percentage of the notes, and the injunction you're asking is so rigorous, the court just didn't dare to do it. Well, to sort of say that we got something right, in a July 2017 bankruptcy decision, I'll touch upon it later, the Dutch Supreme Court actually said that these funds lent from Finco to OI could have been, the transaction could have been annulled on the basis of fraudulent transaction. So standing before the court, we were right, but we lost everything. Then the OI case in the Netherlands. So what we see is that on the 20th of June, the RJ proceedings were opened. A Chapter 15 proceeding was deemed applicable, and nonetheless, bankruptcy proceedings were started in the Netherlands. The whole purpose of that was getting a trustee to act on the intercompany claims against OI, because that were the biggest assets of the financing vehicles. And here you see also separate bankruptcy proceedings in the Netherlands, even though there were already RJ proceedings and Chapter 15 proceedings, but nonetheless, the Dutch courts deemed themselves competent to rule on these. And also the Netherlands, we do not see a problem at all, because it's a Dutch company, and despite the fact that other insolvency proceedings are applicable, we don't care. also from the chart, you see every time after a bankruptcy proceedings was requested, the company itself requested a suspension of payment. And that is just because this is a defense mechanism. A suspension of payment by the company basically suspends the bankruptcy request. You get, as a board, you stay on, but any decision you make, you have to get the approval of the administrator. If you don't do it, it is even a criminal offense, and it's a ground for withdrawal of the bankruptcy. Nonetheless, you can start huge debates on which acts are to be approved, which not. So obviously it provided the Brazilian companies with some leeway on which they could do and which they couldn't do. And also in the press, it's much better if you can tell, well, we're in a suspension of payments, it's a reorganization mechanism, the board is still in charge, and we have an administrator overseeing everything. So basically, what can go wrong? And when you file for suspension of payments as a company in the Netherlands, you can also at the same time file a composition plan. You say, I want a suspension of all creditors chasing me, and here's my plan to reorganize the company to make a solution for the due debts. And it was actually pretty interesting what they did in OI. They basically made an extension of the RJ plan, and that is allowed in the Netherlands. We have no real requirements as to the content of a composition plan. We see third-party financing, debt for equity, and also even what they did here, saying you will get under the Dutch plan whatever you get in Brazil. And that's basically what they did. And again, a smart move, I think, from the company, because it was just a factual implementation, an extension of the RJ plan in the Netherlands. There was one small hurdle OI had to take, was that normally you have a vote on a composition plan on a relatively short notice. But they got the court to postpone the vote on the plan for almost a year. So in theory, they could get the RJ plan approved and then have the Dutch plan approved. So the implementation of this was actually quite well done. There was one bigger hurdle on the composition plan. It's actually the biggest hurdle. The plan entailed for substantive consolidation. So it did not recognize the intercompany debts. Well, when you were a creditor of the financing vehicles, actually the only asset, if you look at the balance sheet of the financing vehicles, is the intercompany claim. But in the RJ plan, that disappeared. And especially in the Netherlands, we were really upset about that, because when filing for the RJ plan, the company itself actually said, we will be a full creditor in the RJ plan, just as any other creditor. In other words, the intercompany claims will be recognized. Well, not a lot happened there. And that's actually the main reason that the creditors kept on pressing for turning the suspension of payment into a bankruptcy. So a trustee would gain full control and pressed within the RJ proceedings for actually full recognition of the intercompany claims, because that would just make for a much larger return on investment for all the creditors that in the meantime got involved in the notes, because there were almost none of the regular investors. There were mostly hedge funds who purchased the notes. And here we see the penalty that the Dutch trustee got when they wanted to act in Brazil. And just I'll keep it short, just to see how it went. There was an informal settlement agreement between all the note holders and actually OI. And that settlement agreement basically entailed you will vote both in favor of the RJ plan and the Dutch plan. And both plans were approved by the court. So here you see, I think, that OI made quite an inventive structure to deal with the problems you see between Netherlands and Brazil. Obviously, there was a lot of fighting, but that's basically just dividing the assets that are available. And at the end of the day, it worked out. So I would say that the fast rule is that Brazilian law and Dutch law can be compatible and aren't that different. Despite that, a lot of lawyers spend a lot of hours being angry at each other.
Muito obrigado, David.